Ezekiel's consciousness is an intricate network of vision, insight, and responsibility, a mind that perceives layers of reality that others overlook, a heart attuned to the weight of divine truth, and a spirit navigating the tension between human frailty and moral mandate. To understand Ezekiel psychologically is to enter a consciousness structured by anticipation, imagination, and moral perception, a mind trained to integrate visions of possibility with the demands of communication, and a heart charged with empathy for a people often blind to the consequences of their actions. His is a psychology forged in the tension of seeing deeply, feeling intensely, and acting purposefully in a world resistant to insight. From the beginning of his prophetic experience, Ezekiel demonstrates an extraordinary capacity for integrative thought. His cognition synthesizes temporal, moral, and relational information simultaneously. Each vision he receives is not merely symbolic or aesthetic. It is cognitively complex, containing patterns, moral imperatives, and relational dynamics that his mind must unpack. This requires a heightened executive function, attention to detail, working memory, ethical reasoning, and predictive foresight. Ezekiel's brain operates as a multidimensional processor, capable of attending to immediate realities while simultaneously mapping symbolic meaning, anticipating consequences, and formulating responsive strategies. Emotionally, Ezekiel is profoundly attuned to the suffering, confusion, and moral blindness of his community. Empathy in his consciousness is not passive. It is dynamic, immersive, and intertwined with moral urgency. He experiences sorrow not as abstract reflection, but as visceral engagement with the consequences of human choice. His emotional landscape is therefore complex. Grief, hope, frustration, and determination coexist, sometimes in tension, creating an intensity of affect that requires both regulation and channeling. The psychology of Ezekiel reflects a mind trained to integrate insight with ethical action, yet burdened by the emotional weight of human resistance and misunderstanding. Central to Ezekiel's psychology is a heightened capacity for imaginative foresight. His visions are cognitive tools, allowing him to perceive abstract moral truths and project their implications into the temporal world. This imaginative foresight is both a gift and a source of strain. It enables him to conceptualize corrective action, divine intention, and societal potential, yet it also isolates him from those unable or unwilling to perceive at the same level. Cognition in Ezekiel is therefore anticipatory, moral, and symbolic. It functions to map complex ethical landscapes and guide action within them. Isolation emerges as a defining feature of his psychological experience. The intensity of perception, combined with the urgency of ethical responsibility, separates him cognitively and emotionally from the normative flow of society. He is aware of realities that remain invisible to others, including the consequences of moral corruption, the inertia of leadership, and the subtle ethical dynamics within the community. This cognitive isolation generates a paradox. It allows clarity and strategic foresight, yet it produces social and emotional distance. Ezekiel must navigate the tension between engagement and withdrawal, balancing proximity to his people with the necessity of moral and cognitive discernment. Faith functions as the structural backbone of Ezekiel's psychology. It provides anchoring in the midst of complex, emotionally charged perception. Faith transforms perception into purpose, insight into action, and awareness into strategy. Psychologically, faith is a stabilizing system. It maintains equilibrium in the face of sorrow, guides judgment in morally ambiguous contexts, and motivates resilience when engagement produces resistance. Without this grounding, the cognitive and emotional demands of Ezekiel's prophetic experience could overwhelm even a mind as disciplined and capacious as his. Communication is a psychological challenge central to Ezekiel's mind. His task requires translating intricate visions into language comprehensible to those with limited perception. This necessitates a form of cognitive empathy, anticipating what others can grasp, framing moral insight in accessible forms, and timing delivery for maximal ethical impact. Creativity in this context is not mere ornamentation. It is an essential cognitive emotional skill. Symbol, metaphor, and narrative function as tools to bridge perception and understanding, translating the extraordinary depth of his consciousness into actionable insight. The anticipatory moral reasoning embedded in Ezekiel's psychology is intense and continuous. He processes the interplay of human agency, ethical principles, and divine mandate, generating a mental map of consequences and potential outcomes. This form of reasoning is both cognitively demanding and emotionally charged. Each insight carries weight, each observation carries responsibility, and each recommendation carries potential consequence. Cognitive load is high, necessitating mechanisms of regulation, reflection, and faith-based anchoring. Expectation compounds psychological demand. Ezekiel internalizes both divine instruction and societal need, creating a constant internal calibration of thought, emotion, and action. He monitors his own effectiveness, anticipates misunderstanding, and adjusts approach accordingly. The psychological skill here is meta-awareness, continuous monitoring of cognition, emotion, and relational impact, ensuring alignment between insight, moral responsibility, and practical influence. This meta-awareness stabilizes judgment, sustains ethical engagement, and supports resilience in the face of repeated resistance and moral blindness. Resilience is integral to Ezekiel's inner architecture. Persistent exposure to societal failure, ethical compromise, and interpersonal rejection necessitates adaptive coping strategies. Emotionally, he regulates intensity. Cognitively, he maintains strategic foresight. Morally, he preserves fidelity to principle. Resilience is not passive endurance, but active engagement, absorbing disappointment, recalibrating approach, and sustaining ethical communication. Faith, hope, and reflection provide the scaffolding for resilience, forming the structural integrity of his consciousness. Hope functions as both psychological sustenance and motivational framework. Despite widespread moral decay and resistance, Ezekiel maintains a vision of restoration and ethical renewal. This hope is deliberate, structured, and pragmatic. It directs focus, anchors perseverance, and provides interpretive clarity. Psychologically, hope integrates cognition and emotion, mitigating despair while motivating action aligned with moral insight. Social perception in Ezekiel is highly refined. He continuously observes motives, intentions, and relational dynamics, anticipating resistance and tailoring communication for maximal ethical influence. This advanced social cognition, perspective-taking, empathy, and strategic messaging ensures that insight is not wasted but effectively transmitted. Yet this sensitivity also intensifies emotional labor. Absorbing societal dysfunction and moral blindness generates strain, requiring ongoing regulation and reflective processing. Ezekiel's consciousness demonstrates remarkable cognitive emotional integration. Thought, emotion, faith, and ethical reasoning coalesce to form coherent action. Emotional regulation stabilizes moral insight. Cognitive flexibility enables adaptive strategy. Social awareness enhances relational impact. This integration produces a mind capable of sustained moral engagement amidst intense societal, political, and spiritual complexity. Responsibility, however, introduces persistent psychological tension. The imperative to act clashes with societal inertia. Urgency conflicts with the necessity for strategic patience. Insight confronts resistance and misunderstanding. Ezekiel navigates these tensions with reflective discipline, moral clarity, and cognitive foresight. Balancing immediate engagement with long-term impact requires sustained metacognitive effort, creating both stress and resilience in the same processes. Internalized standards amplify cognitive emotional load. Ezekiel continuously evaluates his own alignment with divine instruction, moral principle, and societal need. Failures or perceived failures prompt introspection and adjustment, enhancing efficacy but also increasing vulnerability to self-critique. This self-regulation requires resilience, emotional moderation, and reflective awareness, ensuring that responsibility does not overwhelm cognition or disrupt emotional stability. The confrontation with human imperfection shapes Ezekiel's emotional and moral psychology. Leadership failure, societal disobedience, and entrenched corruption demand both discernment and empathetic engagement. Awareness of limitations fosters humility, reflective depth, and ethical grounding, structuring consciousness to integrate perception with principled action while negotiating inevitable resistance and disappointment. Emotional intensity defines the inner life of Ezekiel. Empathy, moral sensitivity, and anticipatory cognition generate deep feelings of sorrow, urgency, and responsibility. Emotional regulation does not suppress experience, but channels it into constructive action. Integration of intense emotion with cognitive foresight allows sustained engagement, moral clarity, and strategic efficacy without psychological fragmentation. Long-term cognitive emotional structure is characterized by vision, insight, and ethical responsibility. Ezekiel synthesizes information across temporal, social, and moral dimensions. Cognitive foresight, ethical evaluation, emotional attunement, and relational insight converge, producing a mind capable of sustained prophetic engagement. Integration ensures clarity, endurance, and adaptive efficacy, despite prolonged exposure to human frailty and moral complexity. Isolation and influence coexist in paradoxical interplay. Ezekiel's insight separates him, yet communication bridges separation. Cognitive isolation enhances perception, yet relational engagement extends influence. Emotional intensity challenges stability, yet empathy ensures connection. Cognitive foresight demands vigilance, yet hope sustains motivation. These dynamics define a psychology of depth, endurance, and purpose. Meta-awareness is a central psychological competency. Ezekiel monitors thought, evaluates judgment, and aligns action with principle. Reflective consciousness supports adaptive strategy, moral clarity, and emotional regulation, sustaining alignment with divine mandate amidst complex social and relational dynamics. Hope, resilience, and moral clarity form the psychological backbone of Ezekiel. Cognition, emotion, and ethical reasoning integrate to produce sustained ethical action. Integration carries cost, yet enables profound insight, influence, and moral agency. Ezekiel exemplifies the paradox of heightened awareness. The burden of perception, the cost of moral clarity, and the isolation of insight coexist with the capacity for influence, guidance, and transformative action. Cognition, emotion, and faith converge to produce a consciousness uniquely capable of navigating complexity, moral urgency, and relational challenge. Ultimately, Ezekiel embodies the integration of cognition, emotion, moral responsibility, and faith. Thought, perception, and imagination merge with emotional intensity and ethical commitment, producing sustained engagement, reflective insight, and strategic influence. Sorrow and hope, clarity and anticipation, insight and communication converge, creating a psychology suited to the demands of divine purpose and human imperfection. The prophet's life demonstrates the interplay of isolation and connection, burden and influence, insight and action. Ezekiel's mind perceives realities hidden to others. His heart experiences sorrow and empathy. His consciousness sustains engagement and reflection. Meta-awareness and cognitive emotional integration enable him to navigate complex moral landscapes with resilience, ethical fidelity, and strategic efficacy. Ezekiel teaches that heightened perception carries psychological cost, yet facilitates moral influence. Emotional intensity, cognitive foresight, and ethical clarity must be balanced with faith, hope, and reflective awareness. Insight isolates, yet communication connects. Awareness burdens, yet purpose sustains. Perception challenges, yet moral principle guides. Ezekiel embodies the potential to integrate mind, heart, and spirit for transformative engagement with a world resistant to insight and slow to recognize ethical clarity. His psychology reveals a consciousness shaped by insight, burdened by responsibility, and sustained by faith and hope. He integrates perception with moral reasoning, emotional attunement with strategic communication, and anticipatory cognition with ethical commitment. His mind models reflective foresight, empathetic understanding, ethical judgment, and adaptive engagement. His heart carries sorrow, urgency, and perseverance. Ezekiel's consciousness exemplifies the integration of depth, clarity, and moral purpose, demonstrating the human capacity to navigate profound societal and spiritual challenges while sustaining clarity, resilience, and ethical coherence. Ezekiel's psychological landscape affirms that awareness and insight are rarely comfortable, yet essential for moral guidance and transformative action. Cognition, emotion, and ethical principle converge to produce a consciousness capable of perceiving deeply, responding strategically, and sustaining influence amid human imperfection and societal resistance. Isolation and engagement, burden and purpose, insight and action coalesce, producing a mind and heart aligned with enduring ethical responsibility. The psychology of Ezekiel illuminates the interplay of perception, moral urgency, and emotional depth. He exemplifies resilience in the face of resistance, hope in the midst of despair, and clarity amidst complexity. Cognitive foresight, empathy, ethical judgment, and relational awareness integrate to sustain his prophetic function. Emotion and insight converge, producing a consciousness capable of navigating human frailty and societal complexity with both efficacy and ethical coherence. Ultimately, Ezekiel demonstrates that human consciousness can integrate vision, moral responsibility, empathy, and faith to navigate complexity, influence ethical outcomes, and endure the burdens of heightened awareness. Insight isolates, yet purpose connects. Perception burdens, yet moral principle guides. Cognitive and emotional intensity challenge, yet hope and faith sustain. Ezekiel embodies the psychological capacity to balance depth with engagement, awareness with action, and moral clarity with empathetic connection. His life and mind illustrate the cost and reward of profound awareness, the burden of insight, the strain of moral responsibility, the isolation of understanding, but also the capacity for transformative engagement, ethical guidance, and enduring influence. Ezekiel's psychology teaches that heightened perception, moral clarity, and emotional intensity can be integrated into sustained, resilient, and ethically coherent action, allowing one to navigate complexity without surrendering purpose, hope, or humanity.